Before we begin today's episode, we want to provide a subject matter warning. This podcast delves into real-life crimes, and they're often graphic and disturbing details. Today's episode contains discussions of violence, murder, and other sensitive topics that may not be suitable for all listeners. We understand that this content can be triggering or upsetting for some, and we urge you to consider your own well-being as you listen. With that said, let's proceed with today's case. Today's episode takes us deep into one of the most puzzling cases in recent memory, the tragic death of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen was a bright, young teacher with a promising future, a loving family, and a wedding just around the corner. But on a snowy January evening in 2011, everything changed. She was found in her apartment with 20 stab wounds, a case that defies logic and has left experts and her loved ones questioning everything. Initially ruled a homicide, her death was later changed to suicide, a decision that's raised more questions than answers. Tonight, we'll dive into the evidence, the inconsistencies, and the theories surrounding Ellen's case. Was this truly a suicide, or is there something darker lying beneath the surface? Join me as we unravel the story of Ellen Greenberg and search for the truth that her family and many others believe is still out there. This is the End of Reason podcast. Now we have to go back to January 26, 2011, when Ellen Greenberg, a dedicated first-grade teacher at Juniata Park Academy, was in the middle of her day with her young students when a sudden blizzard swept across Manayunk, Pennsylvania. The heavy snow forced the school to close early, granting Ellen and her students an unexpected reprieve. But Ellen didn't rush out with the first wave of teachers and staff. Instead, she took time to ensure each of her students had a safe way home, a testament to her caring nature and devotion to her role. She left only after her students were secure, heading back to her sixth-floor apartment in the Manayunk neighborhood, a place she shared with her fiancé, Sam Goldberg, who was down at the gym in their apartment building. It was one of those routines: pop down, get in a workout, and head back upstairs. But when Sam returned to their apartment after his workout, he was met with something strange. The front door was locked, not just the kind of locked where you can fiddle with a key and it opens right up. No, this was the deadbolt, locked tight from the inside. Sam tried to get in, but he couldn't. So Sam started calling, texting, saying hello. Open the door. What are you doing? I'm getting pissed. Hello, you better have an excuse. What the fuck? You have no idea. This got no response, so he started pounding on the door to get Ellen's attention and unlock it, but there was still no response. After roughly a half hour, Sam broke. Opened the door to find the body of Ellen in the kitchen leaning against a cabinet. This was when Sam called 911 at 6:30 p.m, sounding panicked and scared, asking for help to arrive as soon as possible. He went to perform CPR with the help of the 911 operator to find a knife still in her chest after unzipping her jacket. When investigators arrived at the apartment, they quickly began to scan the scene for any clues that might explain Ellen's tragic death. But what they found, or rather didn't find, only deepened the mystery. Aside from the front door Sam had broken through to get inside, there was no evidence of forced entry. All of their valuables were still in place, nothing had been disturbed or taken, and when they looked for forensic evidence, the results were eerie. No fingerprints, no stray DNA, just Ellen's. But when investigators looked around the rest of the apartment, they found strained blueberries and a freshly cut orange, suggesting Ellen was making a snack just before the time of death. She was also holding a white towel in her left hand, and 2 clean knives were in the sink. Despite the unsettling scene, investigators could tell there was nothing more they could do. At 6:40 p.m., Ellen Greenberg was officially pronounced dead in her own apartment. The autopsy findings were as shocking as they were unsettling. Ellen Greenberg had been stabbed a staggering 20 times 10 of those wounds were to her back and neck, areas notoriously difficult to reach on your own. The rest was on her chest and abdomen, and there was a gash on the top of her head. As if that weren't disturbing enough, the medical examiner also found 11 bruises in various stages of healing across her arm, abdomen, and right leg. With evidence like this, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office initially ruled Ellen's death a homicide. But then, in a baffling twist, just weeks later, they reversed their decision, ruling her death a suicide. There was no explanation, and no new evidence was released to support this change. Ellen's parents didn't even hear about the reversal directly. They found out through media reports. But going back to the 911 call from that night gives us a glimpse into those first chaotic, heart-wrenching moments after Ellen's body was found. But it also reveals a crucial inconsistency, one that raises questions about the very foundation of the police's findings. On the call, Sam Goldberg describes Ellen lying flat on her back on the floor. Yet when police arrived, they reported finding her slumped against the corner cabinets in the kitchen, with her head, neck, and shoulders propped up, not lying as Sam had described. And that inconsistency, it's just one of many that have emerged over the years as Ellen's parents have fought tirelessly to understand what really happened to their daughter. For over a decade, the Greenbergs have battled for answers, navigating a maze of dead ends and bureaucratic resistance. Frustrated by the lack of transparency, they took matters into their own hands. They purchased Ellen's autopsy report, studied photos from the scene, and assembled a team of independent experts, including forensic pathologists and a blood spatter specialist, who have all challenged the official suicide ruling. In October 2019, the Greenbergs, along with their attorney, Joseph Podraza Jr., filed a lawsuit against the city of Philadelphia. Their goal? To change the manner of Ellen's death from suicide back to homicide, or, at the very least, undetermined. If successful, this would reopen the investigation and could pave the way for a wrongful death or misconduct lawsuit against the city. But the city is fighting back. The Philadelphia Law Department has vigorously defended the suicide ruling. In court filings, they argued that even if the medical examiner's findings were incorrect, the law protects their professional discretion, allowing them to stand by their conclusion regardless. This civil suit has brought new, unsettling details to light about the investigation. Among them, testimony suggesting that one of Ellen's neck wounds may have been inflicted after she was already dead. And now, the case heads to Commonwealth Court, where the question looms. Will this lawsuit be enough to change the manner of death? Could it provide the Greenberg family with the answers they've been desperately seeking? Osborne initially concluded this was a homicide, but when he informed police, they asked him to hold off on officially classifying it, as they were still investigating. Just 2 days later, police publicly contradicted Osborne's findings, hinting at a possible suicide and suggesting Ellen had experienced some mental issues. In response, Osborne sought further clarity. He consulted with a neuropathologist to examine Ellen's spinal cord, hoping to determine whether the wounds would have incapacitated her, making it impossible for her to stab herself. Dr. Lucy Rourke Adams, a renowned neuropathologist, conducted a quick examination and reported that Ellen's spinal cord was not damaged to the point that would prevent her from moving. But here's the thing. This examination was informal. Osborne described taking a section of Ellen's spine through very heavy snow to Rourke Adams at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. No official report was written, and Rourke Adams herself has since stated she has no memory of conducting the exam. As the investigation continued, Osborne and then Chief Medical Examiner Sam Gulino were called to a highly unusual meeting with the District Attorney's Office and the Philadelphia Police Department. Both men testified that such a meeting was unprecedented in their careers, raising questions about why this case was treated differently. During this meeting, Osborne was told that a doorman was present with Sam Goldberg when he broke into the apartment, seemingly confirming there was no other way for an intruder to have entered. This information reportedly influenced Osborne's decision to change the ruling to suicide, but in later civil proceedings, the doorman testified that he was not with Goldberg when the door was broken, a claim backed by security footage. Podraza, the Greenberg's attorney, pressed Osborne in court. If the doorman had not been with Goldberg when the door was broken, would Osborne still stand by the suicide ruling? Osborne replied, "No, I would not." For the Greenbergs, this was a damning revelation, yet the inconsistencies don't end there. Dr. Lindsay Emery, another pathologist, conducted an exam of Ellen's spinal column and noted 2 sharp force injuries that didn't cause bleeding, suggesting they may have been inflicted post-mortem. This detail raised even more questions. Could some of the wounds have been inflicted after Ellen had already passed? And if so, how does that fit with the official narrative? Now let's look at Ellen. She was born on June 23, 1983, in New York City to her parents, Josh and Sandy Greenberg. She was their only child, and as her mother described her, a fun, loving, bubbly young woman with a bright future ahead of her. The Greenbergs moved to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 1994, and it was there that Ellen spent her school years, attending Susquehanna Township schools. She was a light in her family's life and had a way of bringing people together, making lifelong friends wherever she went. Ellen attended Penn State University, where she truly shined. She was a lionizer, working with the football team to introduce players and their families to the campus and even helping out on the field. She loved Penn State, loved the game, and brought people from all different backgrounds together through her warmth and spirit. Ellen had a gift for uniting people. Friends from camp, high school, and college all became friends because of her. She graduated with a degree in communications, originally planning to pursue speech pathology, but soon realized her heart was in teaching. She enrolled at Temple University to earn her teaching credentials. It was during this time that Ellen met Sam Goldberg, a television producer, through mutual friends. Their connection grew, and things seemed to be falling into place. Ellen soon landed a job teaching at Juniata Park Academy in Philadelphia, where she became that teacher, the one students adored, who greeted them with hugs and left a lasting impression. Her father recalls, "She felt good about what she was doing, and the kids loved her. She was the teacher students wanted, the one they bragged about." Ellen and Sam eventually got engaged, planning an August wedding at the luxurious Hershey Hotel, a day that was supposed to be a fairy tale for Ellen, her family, and friends, but a day that would never come. About 3 years into her teaching career, in 2010, Ellen began to feel a change in herself. She called her parents, sharing that she was feeling unusually anxious and overwhelmed, even expressing thoughts of leaving her job in Philadelphia and moving back to Harrisburg. For her parents, it was surprising. Ellen had worked so hard to build her career and was in the midst of planning a wedding. Her father encouraged her to see a psychiatrist before making any drastic changes. Ellen agreed and attended 3 appointments in January, on the 12th, 17th, and 19th. She was prescribed medication for her anxiety, and soon after, she texted her mum, relieved, saying the new medication was starting to work, It seemed like things were looking up. Ellen was getting her anxiety under control, ready to tackle wedding plans again. Just 4 days before her death, she sent out her save-the-date cards, excited about her future with Sam. At the same time, she was also preparing for her close friend's wedding and had plans that weekend to shop for her bridesmaid dress. On that day, her friend picked her up, but something was off. She didn't look like herself, her friend later said. Ellen was always so put together, but that day her hair wasn't done, and she just seemed different. In the fitting room, Ellen became emotional, apologizing and saying, "I know I'm not myself, but I'll get it together." Her friend could see the strain on her, but chose not to push, sensing that Ellen didn't want to shift the focus to herself. Ellen briefly mentioned feeling stressed and wanting to quit her job and move back home, a sentiment that surprised her friend as much as it had her parents. Something wasn't right, her friend later reflected. My father-in-law worked with her, and he said there was no reason for her to feel that way. Everyone loved her there. That day would be the last time Ellen saw her friend. Now let's look at a theory. One theory surrounding Ellen Greenberg's tragic death is that she was the victim of foul play, and her death was staged to appear as a suicide. The unusual circumstances of her injuries, combined with inconsistencies in the investigation, have led many, including forensic experts and her family, to believe this theory. Let's start with the physical evidence. Ellen was found with 20 stab wounds on her body, 10 to her chest and abdomen, 10 more to her back and neck. Some of these wounds were in locations nearly impossible for a person to self-inflict, especially given the degree of force required. The fact that a knife was found lodged in her chest makes the suicide ruling even harder to accept. Experts have pointed out that self-inflicting that many wounds would likely cause the body to enter shock after just a few, making it implausible for her to continue. Further fueling suspicion is the lack of defensive wounds. This has been interpreted by some investigators as a sign that Ellen either knew her attacker or was incapacitated in some way. A person being ambushed or attacked by surprise might not have had time to defend themselves. Alternatively, she may have been unable to fight back due to a struggle or restraint. Now let's consider the inconsistencies in the investigation. When Ellen was initially found, the scene lacked any indication of forced entry, but there was also no witness to confirm exactly what had transpired. Her fiancé, Sam Goldberg, reported breaking down the door to get inside, but his account has been met with skepticism. In later testimony, a security guard who was allegedly present during Sam's forced entry stated he did not witness the break-in. Additionally, video surveillance showed he did not accompany Sam to the apartment, creating doubt about what really happened in those moments before Ellen was found. A critical turning point in this theory involves the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office initially ruling Ellen's death as a homicide, but reversing it to suicide shortly after. According to Ellen's family and their attorney, the shift in classification may have been influenced by pressure from the police. The reasoning behind this switch has never been fully explained, leaving many to question whether it was done to close the case more quickly or avoid the challenges of a complex homicide investigation. One particular detail that supports a staged scene is the alleged presence of 2 non-bleeding wounds on Ellen's body, as noted in forensic examinations. Lack of bleeding suggests these injuries may have been inflicted post-mortem, raising the disturbing possibility that her body was manipulated after death to make it look like she could have inflicted the wounds herself. In this theory, Ellen's fiancé, or perhaps an unknown third party, may have been responsible for her death. The lack of evidence suggesting an intruder led some investigators to suspect that if foul play occurred, it was committed by someone close to her, someone who would have access to the apartment and knowledge of her routines. As we wrap up this episode, we're left with one question that echoes through every detail of this case. What really happened to Ellen Greenberg? Here was a young woman who had her whole life ahead of her, surrounded by family and friends who adored her. A teacher who inspired her students, a bride-to-be planning her future. And yet, her life was cut short in a way that defies all understanding. The official ruling says suicide, but the evidence, the unanswered questions, and the haunting inconsistencies have left Ellen's family and many others unconvinced. Her parents continue to fight, year after year, refusing to accept an answer that doesn't make sense. They want justice, not just for Ellen, but for the truth that seems hidden somewhere in the shadows of this case. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us hoping for a re-investigation, one that can shine a light on those shadows and bring some measure of closure to those who loved Ellen. Until that day comes, this case stands as a stark reminder of how sometimes, even in the pursuit of truth, justice can feel just out of reach. Thank you for joining me today on the End of Reason podcast. I hope this story has left you as unsettled and as determined for answers as it has me. Remember to stay curious, keep asking questions, and never take the easy answers at face value. I'm CR Knight, and I'll be here next time to bring you more stories that defy reason and demand our attention. If you found this episode as compelling as we did, don't forget to hit that follow button to stay updated on our latest releases. And if you have thoughts, questions, or your own theories on the case, please leave a comment or review. It helps others discover the podcast and join the conversation. Your support means the world to us, and together, maybe we can bring more attention to cases like Ellen's. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the End of Reason podcast. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows of humanity on the End of Reason podcast. As we conclude today's episode, remember that the pursuit of truth never truly ends. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never let go of reason.